Hello, my midnight creepers, and welcome back to another episode of Disturbing Ouija Board Reddit threads. I love reading these, so if you enjoy these stories, make sure to like, subscribe, comment down below, and support me in my journey.
I found a Ouija board hidden inside my father's old rotary phone, and every night at 3 a.m., the planchette starts vibrating like a ringer. I finally followed the hum into the crawlspace, and it's coming from a pile of my own baby teeth tucked inside the insulation. 2:48 a.m., half a coffee in, zero sleep. Okay, so I wasn't even planning on posting this, but something just happened, and now I'm too freaked out to go back to sleep. I've had this draft sitting in my notes app for a couple days, trying to figure out how to start it without sounding completely insane, but it's like there's no normal way to say, I think my dad hid a Ouija board inside an old rotary phone, and now something is calling me from inside my walls. So yeah, whatever. Here goes. So my dad died last spring. Sudden cardiac thing. Dropped in the parking lot of a Waffle House just outside Reading. EMT said it was instant. I hadn't seen him in person in over a year, not since Thanksgiving, but we texted sometimes. He'd send weird, blurry pictures of garage sale junk or random conspiracy memes. That kind of dad. Anyway, I was the one who got stuck going through his stuff. He lived alone in this tiny rental house. One bedroom, ancient fridge, brown carpet that probably used to be white. The kind of place where the wallpaper smells like old paperbacks and motor oil. There wasn't much to sort through, but the basement caught me off guard, because I didn't even know he had a basement. Growing up, he'd always tell me the door was jammed. Don't bother. Nothing down there but mold and dead spiders. Once, when I was a kid, I tried picking the lock with a bobby pin and got grounded so hard I still flinch when I hear a doorknob rattle. But now I had the keys. I put off opening it for a couple days, telling myself it wasn't urgent, but really I just didn't want to. Something about that door gave me the same feeling as standing at the edge of a pool at night, like I knew nothing was down there. But what if there was? When I finally unlocked it, the air that came out was cold and flat, and weirdly clean. Not musty, not mildewy, clean. But not in a good way. Like hospital linens in plastic clean. The basement was bigger than expected. No lights except a naked bulb hanging from a nail, which flickered when I pulled the chain. Concrete floor, unpainted walls, old workbench against the far side with these jars of screws and buttons and what looked like baby shoes, but I didn't want to look too closely. And right in the center of the bench, not pushed to the side or packed in a box, but dead center like it was on display, was a black rotary phone. You know the kind I mean. The spin dial ones. Heavy, glossy. Looked like it belonged in a Cold War bunker. Except this one didn't have a cord. No cable, no jack. Just sitting there, waiting. At first, I figured it was just a collector's thing. My dad was into old junk. But when I picked it up, something rattled. Inside. Not loose screws, something softer. And underneath the handset, taped to the plastic in what looked like surgical tape, was a folded square of paper. I don't even remember deciding to open it. I just did. The paper had 2 lines written in heavy black ink. Do not answer after 3. Do not turn the dial. 3 what? I had no clue. 3 rings. 3 minutes. 3 a.m. I wish I could say I took the note seriously. I didn't. I just laughed and tossed it aside. The dial still spun perfectly, which was weird. There wasn't even dust inside. And under the dial plate, through the scratched plastic, I could see something. Not mechanical, not electrical, something carved. I unscrewed the casing. Just curiosity, you know. And that's when I saw it. There was a miniature Ouija board carved into the wood beneath the dial. Letters A to Z. Yes/no/goodbye. Small, clean, almost elegant. And where the screw cap should have been, in the center, was a tiny planchette, about the size of a nickel, bone-colored, smooth, cold. When I touched it, it vibrated. Not an electrical buzz, like a hum, low, alive. I dropped the phone. It thudded against the concrete. Didn't crack. Just sat there, dead quiet. Then from behind the wall, behind the insulation in the far corner of the room, came the same hum, like it echoed through the wood, like something behind the wall heard me touch it. I told myself it was a draft, or maybe the furnace. But the hum kept going, just for a few seconds, like a ringtone fading out. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even take the phone upstairs. I just left it there, like it would be pissed if I moved it. And the worst part? When I brushed my teeth and looked in the mirror like always, something felt wrong. Not my face, not the room. Just this little, awful feeling. Like I was being looked at from behind the mirror, from inside the walls. And around 3 a.m., I swear I heard the phone ring. Just once. No power. No cord. Just one long, drawn-out tone, like a warbling throat trying to mimic the sound of a rotary bell. I didn't check. I just laid there, in bed, absolutely still. I thought I was losing my mind. But the next night, it rang again. And this time, the planchette moved. All right. So, let me try and explain what happened next without sounding like I should be medicated. Because I've gone over it again and again in my head, rewinding every minute like I'm scrubbing through a glitchy video, and nothing makes sense. I don't even know if it can make sense. But I remember everything. The order of events, the sound, the smell, the way it felt in the room. And I haven't told anyone this. Not my girlfriend, not my brother, not even my group chat. I've had the text drafted a dozen times, but I always delete it. I don't know how to say this shit without sounding like I'm trying to go viral. or fake some creepy pastor. But this isn't the story. It happened. I didn't go near the phone for 2 days. Just left it there, on the workbench like a live animal. Door locked, basement lights off. But on the third night, something changed. I woke up at 2:59 a.m. Exactly. No noise, no alarm. Just eyes open, fully awake, heart already racing, and I knew before I even sat up that it was about to happen again. The ring. Not the phone ringing. The sound of something trying to copy it. Not electronic, not mechanical. The closest thing I can compare it to is the sound a person makes when they try to mimic a bell with their mouth. You know what I mean? That wet, wrong quality. Like lips and throat, can't quite get it right, but keep trying. 3 seconds later, it started. Roaring sounds. Mouth made. Living. Wrong. I sat up. Not because I wanted to, because it felt like my body had already made the choice for me. I didn't even put shoes on, just walked barefoot through the kitchen, past the fridge, down the hall. The basement door was open. Not all the way, just an inch. Enough to see the light was already on. And remember, I turned it off 2 days ago. I don't remember walking down the steps. All I remember is standing at the bottom and realizing something in the air was moving. Like a pressure, like breathing. The kind of feeling you get standing under high-tension wires. Like your skin is listening harder than your ears. The phone sat on the bench, exactly where I left it. But the dial was turning, on its own, very slowly, like someone was dialing one number at a time, but using breath. I swear on my life, it was pulling itself around. A full, wet-sounding rotation, then a pause, then the next. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I didn't even blink. And that's when the humming started again. But this time, it wasn't coming from behind the insulation. It was coming from beneath the floor, right under my feet. Deep, faint. Not a voice. Not quite, but close. A noise just on the edge of language. Like a person trying to talk from behind a mouthful of cloth. It said my name. Not clearly. Not directly. But enough that I felt it in my own skull. Vibrating up through my legs and spine. Screm voice. Matthew! I nearly threw up. The crawlspace access is just behind the furnace. This tiny square cut into the wall maybe 2 feet high. My dad always told me it was sealed. That there was nothing back there except dust and black widows. But the panel was loose. Not open. Not quite. Just pushed out an inch or two. And from the crack between the drywall and frame, something thin was sticking out. At first, I thought it was string. Then I realized it was hair. Not a wig. Not a clump. A single strand of long human hair, moving like it was caught in a breeze. There is no airflow down there. I went back upstairs. I don't remember moving. I don't remember my legs. Just remember standing in the kitchen holding a butcher knife with my hand shaking and my teeth clenched so hard I chipped one. I didn't sleep. I waited until the sun came up. Then I went back down. Everything looked normal. The phone was still there, silent, still unplugged. The crawlspace panel was flush against the wall again. But there was something under the workbench. It looked like a pile of insulation fluff, but more yellow. I used a broom to poke it. It cracked. I leaned closer. Nestled into the middle of the pink fiberglass was a Ziploc bag. Inside were teeth. Baby teeth. Tiny, off-white, some with blood still dried in the roots. Dozens of them. Different shapes. Different sizes. I counted 34 before I had to stop. Some of them had black Sharpie on the enamel, numbers, maybe dates. One had my initials written on the bottom. I dropped the bag. Couldn't stop shaking. But worse than the teeth, there was another bag. This one wasn't sealed. Inside were strands of hair. Some brown, some black, some red blonde, tangled like they'd been pulled out at the root. And in the very bottom, God, I can't even write this without my stomach turning. There were 4 fingernails, tiny, pink, still with skin under the tips. I couldn't move. I just crouched there on the basement floor, next to a rotary phone built into a homemade Ouija board, a bag of human hair, and my own childhood teeth, and thought, what the fuck was my father doing down here? Because here's the part I didn't mention earlier. When my dad died, they found puncture marks on his chest. Not stab wounds. Not bullet holes. Just 2 little marks spaced about 4 inches apart, clean through his shirt and undershirt, like he'd been clamped. No bruising, no tearing. Just perfect circles burned right through the fabric and skin. The coroner ruled it electrical burns. But he was found sitting in his truck, engine off, no wires, no signs of lightning. I only saw the photos once, on my uncle's phone. But when I looked at them, the holes weren't just round. They were spinning. Not like the picture was blurry. The flesh itself looked like it had been twisted. Spiral punctures, corkscrewed in. And now I keep thinking about that phone dial. How it turned itself. How it hummed my name. How every time I walk past a mirror now, I feel a split second of lag. Like my reflection is a frame or 2 behind. Like I'm not looking at me anymore.
Okay, I need to stop for a second. I've been reading these over and over and I keep telling myself it's just a story. But there's something about the way it's written that doesn't feel performative. It doesn't feel like someone is trying to scare you. It feels like someone is trying to organize panic. Detail about the teeth, about recognizing your own initials, that's not the kind of thing people usually invent for a fact. That's the kind of detail that shows up when someone is stuck replaying a memory they don't know what to do with. I don't know what comes next yet, I haven't read it ahead, but if you're listening to this at night, yeah, maybe don't be standing right next to the wall right now. I'm going to keep going, Just fair warning, this doesn't get lighter from here.
4:11 a.m. The house sounds different when you know what's inside it. I didn't throw the bags away. I keep thinking that's the part that makes me sound the worst. Not the fear, not the shaking, not the way I stood there staring at them like they were going to rearrange themselves into an explanation. It's the fact that I didn't call the police, didn't call anyone. I just slid them back under the workbench with the broom and pretended I hadn't seen them. Because some part of me already knew that if I dragged anyone else into this, whatever was happening would stop being contained. It would spread. And I don't mean that in a dramatic way. I mean it like mold, like rot, that only stays quiet as long as you don't disturb it. The rest of that day felt fake. I went to Starbucks, ordered the same iced coffee I always get, stood in line behind a guy arguing about oat milk. And the whole time I had this pressure in my ears, like I was underwater. Every time the barista called out a name, I flinched, convinced for half a second she'd say mine in that stretched, humming voice from the basement. When I got back to the house, I sat in my car scrolling my phone, not wanting to go inside. I ended up on one of those deep web forums I used to lurk on in college, the kind you reach through links buried in Reddit threads that get deleted an hour later. I don't even remember the URL, just the layout. Black background, grey text, threads stacked like gravestones. I typed one word into the search bar. Teeth. Hundreds of posts. Ritual stuff. Urban legends. People selling things they claimed were haunted vessels. I skimmed past most of it until a thread title snagged in my brain. Rotary gates and bone keys. The post was old. Years old. The user's icon was a blank silhouette. The text was rambling, half coherent, but certain phrases punched through the static. Communication devices are easier to open than mirrors. Childhood remnants carry the strongest resonance. A dial is a circle, and circles invite rotation. Then a line that made my stomach go tight and cold. The crawl space is ideal, close to the body of the house, close to the sleepers. I closed my laptop so hard it snapped. Sat there in the dark reflection of the screen, seeing my own face layered over that text. And behind me, in the hallway, I heard a single soft sound. Not the ring. A tap. Like a fingernail flicking drywall. I turned around slow. The hallway was empty, but the tap came again, a little farther down. Then again. A trail of tiny knocks moving toward the basement door. I followed them before I could talk myself out of it. Each tap landed just ahead of my steps, guiding me. By the time I reached the door, my hands were numb and my jaw ached from clenching. The basement light was already on again. I don't remember deciding to go down. 1 second I was at the top of the stairs. The next, my foot was on the bottom step, and the air was thick and humming. Not loud. It didn't need to be. It was inside my head now, syncing with my pulse. The phone wasn't on the workbench. It was on the floor in front of the crawlspace panel, placed there carefully, like an offering. The hatch was open, not wide, just enough to show the black mouth of the space beyond. And from inside, the hum rolled out in warm waves, carrying a smell that didn't belong in any house. Sweet and sour at the same time. Like old candy left in a hot car mixed with something animal. My phone buzzed in my pocket. The sudden vibration almost made me scream. I yanked it out with shaking fingers. No number. No contact name. Just a blank incoming call. I answered without thinking. For a second, there was only static. Then I heard breathing. Slow, wet. And under it, the familiar attempt at a ring formed by a throat that didn't understand sound the way we do. I held the phone away from my ear, but the noise didn't get quieter. It spilled into the room itself, syncing with the hum from the crawlspace until the air felt crowded with it. And then, through the speaker, I heard a whisper that was unmistakably my own voice. Come see. I dropped my phone. The screen didn't crack. It just went dark. Call still connected, the whisper looping faintly from the speaker on the floor. The crawlspace seemed to widen as I stared at it. The darkness inside wasn't flat. It had depth, layers, like I was looking down a tunnel that bent away from normal geometry. The insulation lining the entrance was matted and discolored, pressed down as if something heavy had been dragging itself in and out for years. There were marks in the dust, not footprints, drag lines, parallel grooves with small punctures between them, repeating in a pattern that made my skin crawl with recognition. They matched the spacing of the punctures in my father's chest. I don't remember getting on my hands and knees. I just remember the texture of the floor against my palms and the way the hum grew louder as my head crossed the threshold. The crawlspace air was warm and damp, clinging to my skin. The beam of my phone's flashlight cut a narrow tunnel through the dark, catching on clumps of insulation and the wooden ribs of the house. About 6 feet in, the space opened into a pocket big enough to sit up in. And in the center of it was a shape that at first looked like a bundled tarp. Then it moved. Not fast. Not in a way that triggered any clean, cinematic fear. It was a slow rearranging, like a pile of laundry settling. The tarp, because it was a tarp, I could see that now, was stitched to the insulation with thick black thread. And beneath it, something shifted, pressing outward. The hum was coming from under that tarp. My flashlight trembled over the surface, and I saw outlines. Rounded protrusions. Small. Dozens of them, packed together. The tarp twitched again, and a corner peeled back just enough to reveal what was underneath. Teeth. Not in a pile, not scattered. Set, embedded into a mass of pale, swollen tissue like seeds in fruit. Rows and rows of baby teeth pushed through a fleshy base that pulsed gently, each vibration sending that humming tone into the air. Thin strands of hair sprouted between them, slick and dark with moisture, twitching as if reacting to the light. In the center of the mass was an indentation shaped exactly like the miniature planchette from the phone. Empty. The tarp convulsed. The teeth chattered in unison. a brittle clicking that filled the crawl space and crawled into my ears. The hum spiked into a sharp, painful whine. And for a second I saw, not with my eyes, but somewhere behind them, an image of my father kneeling in this same space, hands buried in that living cluster, pressing something down into its center while it writhed around his wrists. I scrambled backward, slamming my head on a beam. The pain was distant, irrelevant. The thing under the tarp surged toward me in a slow, horrible ripple, dragging itself an inch at a time. The embedded teeth scraped against the wood with a sound like cutlery in a drawer. My phone on the basement floor started ringing. A real ring this time. Loud. Metallic. The rotary bell perfectly replicated. Each peal sent a shudder through the mass in the crawl space, making it recoil slightly, like it was tethered to the sound. I kicked backward out of the opening, heels skidding on concrete. The rotary phone sat upright, its dial spinning wildly. The tiny planchette was gone. Behind me, from the crawl space, something began to pull itself forward with wet determination. I could hear the insulation tearing, the slow drag of that seeded body forcing its way toward the light. And over all of it, layered thick as syrup, my own voice spilled from the darkness, whispering from 100 tiny mouths at once. Answer. I don't remember deciding. My hand just moved. I snatched up the receiver and pressed it to my ear. The basement went silent. No hum. No dragging. No whisper. Just a vast, empty quiet, and the faint sound of breathing on the other end of the line. Not mine. Not human. It inhaled slowly, like it was tasting the inside of my skull. And in that breath, I felt a pressure settle into me. A cold certainty sliding behind my thoughts and locking into place. The line clicked. Dead. From the crawl space came a final, soft rustle. When I forced myself to look, the opening was empty. No tarp, no teeth. Just flattened insulation and a dark stain seeping into the wood, already drying. The phone in my hand was warm. The dial had stopped spinning. In the center, the tiny planchette had returned, but it wasn't bone white anymore. It was pink and wet. I dropped it like it burned. It hit the floor with a dull crack, and for a second, I thought I heard something small and brittle snap inside it. That night, I didn't try to sleep. I sat on the kitchen floor with every light on, staring at the basement door, listening to the house settle around me in a new, unfamiliar rhythm. Every so often, from somewhere deep in the walls, I could hear a faint clicking, like teeth adjusting themselves. And each time it happened, my tongue would ache with a phantom memory of gaps that hadn't been there since I was a child. 5:02 a.m. I keep checking the time, like it's a wound that won't close. I didn't go back down there after that. not right away. I spent the rest of the night sitting with my back against the kitchen cabinets, watching the thin line of light under the basement door like it might start moving. Every small house noise sounded intentional. The fridge compressor kicking on felt like a footstep. The pipes ticking in the walls sounded like knuckles tapping from the inside. Around sunrise, my phone lit up with notifications. Group chat messages, work emails, a spam call from a number flagged as a scam risk. Normal life pushing back in, trying to overwrite what I'd seen. I almost let it. I showered. I got dressed. I even drove to McDonald's and sat in the parking lot, eating a breakfast sandwich I couldn't taste, watching commuters shuffle in and out with their coffees. Everyone looked so sealed inside themselves, so safely contained. I remember staring at this guy laughing into his AirPods and thinking, you have no idea what your house is capable of hiding. The thought made my hands shake so bad I dropped my drink. I went back home and told myself I was going to pack a bag. Just essentials. Laptop, clothes, documents. I'd stay at a motel for a few nights. Clear my head. Distance makes things smaller, right? But the second I stepped inside, I knew I wasn't leaving. The house felt occupied. Not in a haunted house cliché way. There were no shadows moving, no cold spots. It was subtler. The air had weight. Like when someone stands too close behind you and you feel their presence before you see them. My ears popped. A pressure change. Gentle, but unmistakable. And threaded through it was a new sound. Not the hum, not the ring. This was softer, irregular, chewing. I froze in the entryway, keys still in my hand. It was coming from the walls. All of them. A scattered, intimate sound, like a mouth working slowly through something fibrous. It would stop for a few seconds, then resume somewhere else. Above me, to my left, beneath the floor. I walked into the living room on legs that didn't feel like mine. The drywall looked wrong. Not visibly damaged, just subtly uneven, as if the surface had softened and settled overnight. A small bulge pushed outward near the baseboard. I stared at it. It pulsed once, gently, like a heartbeat. Then it smoothed back into place. My stomach turned inside out. I grabbed a screwdriver from the kitchen drawer and crouched by the wall. Every instinct screamed at me to stop, to back away, but curiosity had me by the throat. I pressed the tip into the drywall and pushed. It sank in with almost no resistance. A thin line opened. From inside, a warm breath spilled out, carrying that same sweet animal smell from the crawlspace. The chewing sound got louder, clearer, wet, methodical. I widened the hole with shaking hands. Something moved in the darkness behind it, a pale ripple sliding away from the light. I caught a glimpse of texture. Not fur, not skin, something in between, studded with tiny white shapes that clicked faintly as they brushed the inner studs of the wall. Teeth. embedded in a living ribbon that threaded through the house like a second nervous system. I stumbled back, the screwdriver clattering across the floor. The hole in the wall twitched at the edges, the drywall flexing as if trying to close itself. A thin strand of saliva stretched from the opening and snapped, leaving a glossy smear on the paint. My phone buzzed in my pocket again. This time, it was a text. Unknown number. A single image. I opened it with numb fingers. It was a photo of me standing in my living room, taken from the corner of the ceiling. My head was tilted toward the wall, screwdriver in hand. The timestamp in the corner read 5:11 a.m. 30 seconds in the future. I looked up. There was nothing in the corner. Just the smoke detector, silent and ordinary. But my phone buzzed again. Another image. Same angle. This one showed the bulge in the wall expanding, pushing outward into the room. And there I was in the frame, frozen mid-step, mouth open in a scream I hadn't made yet. The wall in front of me swelled. A long, horizontal crack split the paint. The chewing sound crescendoed into a frantic chorus. The drywall peeled back like skin, and the thing inside pressed forward, testing the air. It wasn't a single creature. It was a mass. A braided column of pale tissue and embedded teeth, weaving in and out of itself. Strands of hair hung from it in damp curtains. As it emerged, the temperature in the room rose, the air thickening until each breath felt used. My phone chimed a third time. Another image. The mass had crossed half the room. In the photo, it was inches from my face. My eyes were rolled back, my jaw slack, and from my open mouth, a thin tendril of that pale tissue was slipping inside. I dropped the phone and ran. I don't remember deciding where to go. My body just fled, crashing through the front door and into the morning light. The world outside was offensively normal. A neighbor was walking her dog. A delivery truck rolled past. I stood on my lawn gasping, waiting for the house to erupt behind me. It didn't. From the outside, it looked unchanged, quiet, closed. My phone buzzed against the grass. I stared at it for a long time before picking it up. The screen showed a live video feed. Not from any app I recognized. Just a window labeled Home. The camera angle was low, close to the floor. I realized with a jolt that it was coming from inside the wall, from the perspective of the thing itself. Through that lens, I watched it slide back into the darkness, folding into the hollow spaces of the house with practiced ease. The last thing to disappear was a cluster of teeth that turned toward the camera, toward me, and clicked together in a slow, deliberate rhythm. The feed cut to black. A final message appeared on the screen. Stay. Not a request, not a threat. A statement of fact. I understood then, with a clarity that hollowed me out, that leaving wouldn't end this. The thing wasn't confined to the basement or the walls. It was threaded through the structure of my life, anchored by those remnants of me my father had fed it. It knew my shape, my voice, my habits. it could follow. I went back inside because the alternative was running forever with something chewing through the spaces behind me. The house greeted me with silence. The hole in the living room wall was gone. Smooth paint. No mark. If not for the screwdriver lying where I'd dropped it, I could have convinced myself I imagined the whole thing. But as I stepped fully into the room, the floorboards beneath my feet gave a soft, collective sigh. And from deep within the walls, in a voice stitched together from 100 tiny clicks, I heard it whisper my name again. Not calling this time, but settling into it, wearing it like it had always belonged there. 6:03 a.m. The sun is up, and it doesn't help at all. I used to think daylight fixed things, that whatever hides in corners and under beds and behind closed doors loses its nerve when the sun comes up. That morning is a kind of reset button. You wake up, you shake it off, and the night turns into a bad story you tell over breakfast. That's what I kept waiting for. A reset. Instead, the light just made everything clearer. And what it showed me was worse than the dark. I stopped leaving. Not because I was trapped, not physically. The doors opened fine. My car still started. My phone still connected to the world. But every time I stepped onto the porch, there was this pressure in my chest, like I was stretching an invisible cord too tight. The farther I went from the house, the harder it pulled. I tested it once. Drove 3 blocks to a gas station. The entire time, my ears rang with a high, steady whine that drowned out the radio. By the time I parked, my vision was tunneling at the edges. I stumbled inside, grabbed a bottle of water I didn't want, and the cashier looked at me like I was about to pass out. My phone buzzed in my hand. A notification from that same blank app. Home. Signal weak. Under it, a live feed opened on its own. The perspective wasn't from inside the walls this time. It was closer, intimate. I was looking at the inside of something wet and pink. A tight tunnel flexing rhythmically. The image lurched forward, and suddenly I was staring at the back of my own teeth. From the inside of my mouth, I gagged and dropped the phone on the counter. The cashier asked if I was okay. His voice sounded distant, warped, like it was traveling through water. I scooped the phone up with shaking fingers, and the feed was gone, replaced by a single line of text. Return. The ringing in my ears spiked into pain. I ran out without paying. Drove back with one hand clamped over my jaw because it felt like my teeth were trying to push outward. The second I crossed my street, the pressure vanished. Clean. Instant. Relief flooded me so hard I almost cried. That's when I understood. It wasn't anchored to the house. It was anchored to me. The crawl space, the walls, the phone. Those were just scaffolding. A place for it to grow until it could root somewhere better, somewhere warmer. I locked myself in the bathroom and stared at my reflection. My face looked normal. Pale, sweaty, terrified. I opened my mouth slowly. At first, I saw nothing unusual. Then I tilted my head and caught a glimmer of movement between my molars. Something pale sliding back out of sight. A faint clicking echoed in my skull, perfectly synchronized with my heartbeat. I pressed my fingers against my cheek and felt it. A subtle shifting under the skin. A braided firmness that didn't belong to muscle or bone. It moved away from my touch with deliberate slowness. Like it knew I was mapping it, my stomach dropped into my legs. Memories started surfacing then. Not new ones. Old ones. Buried ones. I was 8 years old, sitting at the kitchen table while my father held a pair of pliers and a paper towel. I remembered the way he smiled without showing teeth, telling me it would be quick, that the tooth fairy paid extra for clean pulls. I remembered the pressure, the twist, and the sound, not the snap of enamel leaving gum. Something deeper, a soft, satisfied hum that filled the room for just a second. I'd forgotten it completely until that moment in the mirror, when the same hum vibrated through my jaw. He hadn't just been collecting teeth. He'd been feeding something that was learning my shape from the inside out. My phone chimed again. Another live feed. This one showed a memory I didn't recognize. My father in the basement, younger than I'd ever seen him, cradling the rotary phone like an infant. The crawlspace opening was wider then, breathing in slow, eager pulses. He was crying. I could see it in the tightness of his shoulders. "I gave you everything," he whispered to whatever was inside. "Everything I had of him. You said it would stop." The hum answered. Louder. Hungry. The feed cut. I slid down the bathroom wall and laughed. A thin, broken sound that didn't feel like it came from me. Because suddenly it all lined up in a way that was horribly, perfectly logical. My father hadn't built a prison. He'd built a transfer. A way to move the thing from himself into the closest vessel it was already attuned to. Me. And it had worked. The chewing in the walls, the mass in the crawl space, the living ribbon threading through the house. Those were after images. Residue. The real body had been migrating for years, piece by piece. Every time a tooth came loose, and he offered it up. Every time he twisted and pulled and smiled that thin smile. I felt it settle deeper inside me as the realization crystallized. A warm, expanding presence filling the hollow spaces of my chest. My heartbeat adjusted to match its rhythm. My breathing synced with a second, slower cadence layered beneath my own. I wasn't fighting it. That was the part that scared me most. I stood up and went back to the basement one last time. The workbench was empty. The phone was gone. In its place sat a small mirror I didn't recognize. Oval, tarnished at the edges. I leaned over it. My reflection smiled. I hadn't moved my mouth. The smile widened, stretching my mirrored face until the skin around it thinned and split. Beneath it, I saw rows of tiny white teeth, packed impossibly tight, flexing and clicking in greeting. Strands of hair drifted in a current I couldn't feel. And behind all of it, looking out through my own eyes, was a depthless, patient awareness that felt like it had been waiting since before I was born. A thought rose in my mind that wasn't entirely mine. We are home. The words didn't echo. They settled. Final. Certain. I should have been screaming, tearing at my skin, doing anything to reject it. Instead, a calm spread through me, thick and heavy. The fear drained out, replaced by a cold clarity. I understood my father in that moment, the exhaustion in his shoulders, the bargains he must have made in the dark. He hadn't been cruel. He'd been tired. And now it was my turn to be the house. I picked up the mirror and felt it warm in my hands. Somewhere above me, in the empty rooms, the floorboards sighed in recognition. The structure of the building hummed softly, a farewell vibration as the last threads of the thing withdrew from its beams and settled fully into my bones. The house was just a house again. I was the one breathing now. I went upstairs and opened the front door. The morning air tasted sharp and new. People walked past on the sidewalk, sealed inside their private worlds. I watched them with a detached curiosity, feeling the presence inside me lean forward, attentive, interested. My jaw ached pleasantly. I rolled my tongue over my teeth and felt a subtle rearrangement, a promise of space being made for more. For a long moment, I stood there, balancing on the threshold, aware of the invisible cord that had once tied me to the house dissolving completely. I could go anywhere. The pressure was gone, because it was traveling with me. I stepped onto the porch and closed the door behind me. The click of the latch sounded final, clean, like the end of a call. Inside my chest, the hum rose in quiet satisfaction, and I smiled. A small, private expression that didn't show my teeth. Not yet. I hate that I read this at 2 a.m. I really hate that my childhood teeth are in a little plastic jar in my mum's bathroom. The rotary phone detail is what got me. That's such a specific, useless object to build something around. Feels like the kind of thing someone would fixate on if they were trying to control something irrational. Yeah, so I'm done. I literally just paused to go check my basement door. And now I'm sleeping with the lights on, like a grown adult coward. The puncture marks you described don't line up with electrical burns at all. Also, spiral trauma like that usually comes from rotational force, not heat. I'm not saying this is real, but that detail is unsettlingly accurate. Cool. Love the implication that my dad yanked my teeth with pliers for the tooth fairy. Love that for me. I don't believe this literally happened, but the logic of it is what's disturbing. The way it escalates makes emotional sense, even if the events don't. That's rare. The tapping, moving toward the basement door, is where my brain checked out. That's exactly how house noises feel when you're already scared. This messed me up. This is why I don't save weird shit from my kids. Teeth, hair, whatever. It's trash. Throw it away. There's something deeply wrong about keeping that stuff. The rotary gates and bone keys thread sounds eerily close to some late 90s Usenet garbage I've seen archived. Teeth and childhood remnants show up a lot in folklore about binding rituals. Just saying. OP, I swear to God, if you say part 3 and then vanish, I'm going to lose my mind. Please at least update to say you're alive. I am dead now, LOL. I am yapping now from heaven. So yeah, these are the comments. And tonight's story. If you enjoyed, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment down below. What do you think about tonight's story? See you in the next episode.